Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Tonight's story, Donald Trump destroys liberal host Liv after shocking question about Melania, is gonna blow you away. Picture a smug host, a packed Nashville studio, and Trump turning it all upside down. It's got heart, grit, and drama for you over 40 folks who love a real story. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. Where are you watching from? Let's roll. The Nashville studio crackled with tension, the lights of Emily's Edge blazing hot overhead. Emily stood at her podium, blonde hair glinting like a spotlight trick, her smile sharp and rehearsed. She tapped her earpiece, hearing Nicky Butt's voice buzz through from the control booth. "We've got him tonight, he said, low and hungry. "Ratings gold, don't hold back." Emily's lips twitched, her fingers tightening on her note cards. She'd been sharpening these questions for weeks, each one aimed to pierce Donald Trump's armor. 3, 2, 1. The stage manager's countdown snapped the room to silence, and the red light flared. "Welcome to Emily's Edge, Nashville." Emily's voice cut through, smooth but edged. "Tonight we got a titan, former president, business legend, Donald Trump." Cheers exploded, a wave of sound from the crowd. Trump strode out from the wings, his black suit crisp, red tie bold against the white shirt, a stark figure against Nashville's denim vibe. He waved once, sharp and quick, then settled into the guest chair, calm as a still river. In the front row, Sarah, a 50-year-old local with deep-set eyes and a steely gaze, leaned forward. "He'll set him straight," she whispered to her friend, her Tennessee drawl thick with hope. Emily didn't waste a second. She tilted her head, smile widening like a trap, springing open. "Mr. Trump, let's start easy. From New York to the White House, now Music City. Would you say you're just lucky?" The word hung there, dripping with a taunt, her eyes daring him to bite. The crowd hushed, a ripple of curiosity tightening the air. Trump didn't blink. He leaned back, hands resting easy, a slow smile curving his lips. "Lucky," he echoed, voice steady and deep, slicing through the studio. "That's a funny one, Emily. Folks in Tennessee, they know better. Luck doesn't build skyscrapers. Luck doesn't create jobs. And it sure doesn't make America great." He paused, letting it sink in, then locked eyes with her. "That's work, sweat, and family, like Melania." A few claps broke out, sharp and eager. Sarah nodded hard, muttering, "That's damn right." Emily's smile flickered, but she recovered fast, brushing her earpiece as Nicky hissed, "Perfect. Reel him in, then hit him." She leaned closer, voice turning sly. "Family, huh? Big word, Mr. Trump. Let's talk Melania. She's quiet, reserved, some say mysterious. Don't the good people of Nashville deserve to know more about her?" The question landed soft but pointed, a baited hook. Sarah frowned, shifting in her seat. "What's she digging for?" she whispered, voice tight. Trump's eyes narrowed, a glint of steel flashing through. "Quiet," he said, low and firm, each word heavy. "I call it dignity, Emily. Something you might not get, but out here in Nashville, folks do. They know grace doesn't need a megaphone." Laughter rippled through the crowd, a few hands clapping louder. Emily's jaw clenched, her note cards bending under her grip. Nicky's voice buzzed again, urgent. "He's dodging. Push harder." Emily straightened, her smile turning cold. "Dignity's nice, Mr. Trump," she shot back, voice rising sharp. "But Melania's no spotlight gal, always in the background. Some might say, just a shadow in your story." Silence crashed down, thick and heavy. Sarah's hands balled into fists. "That's low," she hissed, anger sparking in her chest. Trump leaned forward, slow and deliberate, his voice dropping to a gravelly edge. "A shadow," he repeated, icy calm washing over the room. "You've got no clue what you're stepping into, Emily." Gasps burst from the crowd, a jolt of shock. Emily's smirk wavered, her confidence cracking. Nicky slammed the console up in the booth, barking, "Keep going, don't lose it." But the air had shifted. Trump's stare pinned her, and the trap she'd set was about to snap back hard. The Nashville studio teetered on the edge of chaos, the air electric after Trump's icy retort. Emily stood frozen for a heartbeat, her podium a flimsy shield against the weight of his words. A shadow? You've got no clue what you're stepping into, Emily. The crowd held its breath, the echo of his voice hanging like thunder over the Cumberland. Up in the control booth, Nicky Butt's knuckles whitened on the console, his voice barking through her earpiece. Don't let him take it, Em. Push back now. Emily blinked, her smirk twitching back to life, though it wobbled under the strain. She couldn't lose this. Not on live TV, not in front of Nashville. She tossed her hair, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle even to her own ears. Oh, I've got a clue, Mr. Trump, she said, her tone sharp, slicing through the tension. I'm just asking what everyone's thinking. Melania's, well, she's not exactly front and center, is she? Not like other political wives, out there loud, visible. So tell me, she paused, leaning in, her eyes glinting with a predator's gleam. Is she really part of this empire you've built? Or just a quiet little piece on the sidelines? The words landed like a slap, bold and biting, and the crowd gasped, a low rumble rolling through the seats. Sarah shot up at her chair, her face flushed with indignation. That's a damn disgrace, she snapped, loud enough for the folks beside her to turn. She's got no right talking like that. Her friend grabbed her arm, whispering, Sit down, Sarah. They're filming. But Sarah shook her off, her eyes blazing. On stage, Trump didn't flinch. He sat still, his hands clasped, but the air around him shifted, darkened like a storm gathering strength. He tilted his head, just a fraction, and when he spoke, his voice was low, steady, a rumble that shook the room. Quiet little piece, he repeated, each syllable deliberate, dripping with disdain. You think that's what Melania is? Let me tell you something, Emily, something you and your fancy note cards wouldn't understand. He leaned forward now, his gaze locking hers in a vice. Melania's not some prop. She's not some loudmouth chasing cameras. She's brilliant, 5 languages, her own career, more grace in one step than you've got in your whole act. A few claps broke out, tentative at first, then louder, rolling through the crowd like a wave. Emily's smile tightened, her fingers fumbling with her earpiece as Nicky's voice crackled, frantic. He's turning it. Hit him again, Em. Go deeper. She squared her shoulders, her voice rising, sharp and desperate. Grace is one thing, Mr. Trump, but let's be real. She's not out there with you, leading, fighting, taking the heat. People wonder, is she just along for the ride? A pretty face in your shadow. The crowd sucked in a collective breath, the insult hanging raw and ugly in the air. Sarah's hands balled into fists, her voice trembling as she muttered, That's it. She's crossed the line. Trump's eyes flashed, a spark of fire breaking through his calm. Along for the ride, he said, his tone rising now, cutting like a blade through the studio's hush. You've got some nerve, Emily. Melania's been by my side through every deal, every fight, every storm, when the cameras weren't rolling, when the headlines turned nasty. She's not in my shadow. She's my strength. His voice boomed, filling the room, and the crowd erupted, cheers and claps thundering from the back. Sarah jumped to her feet, shouting, Hell yes. Tell her. Her friend yanked her down, but the fire in her eyes burned bright. Emily stumbled back a step, her podium rocking slightly under her grip. She opened her mouth, but Trump wasn't done. He stood now, towering over the stage, his presence swallowing the lights. You want to talk shadows? He roared, pointing a finger straight at her. Look at yourself, hiding behind cheap shots, thinking you can tear down what you don't even understand. Melania is worth 10 of you, and Nashville knows it. The crowd went wild, a sea of noise crashing over the set. Sarah clapped so hard her palms stung, tears pricking her eyes as she yelled. That's the truth. Up in the booth, Nicky slammed his fist on the console, his voice a panicked hiss. Cut to commercial now. She's losing it. But the stage manager froze, the red light still glaring. Emily's face paled, her note cards slipping to the floor with a soft thud. She tried to speak, her voice shaky. Mr. Trump, I didn't mean, but he cut her off, his tone dropping back to that deadly calm, each word a hammer strike. Oh, you meant it, Emily. And that's your mistake. You think you can drag her name through the mud? You're about to find out what happens when you poke the wrong bear. The studio fell silent, a stunned, electric hush. Sarah's breath caught, her heart pounding as she whispered, "He's not backing down." Emily's eyes darted to the booth, pleading for rescue, but Nikki just stared, mouth agape. The crowd leaned forward, every soul hanging on Trump's next move. The trap had flipped, and Emily was the one caught, exposed, unraveling. What came next would sear this Nashville night into legend, and no one dared blink. The Nashville studio pulsed with raw energy, Trump's words, "You're about to find out what happens when you poke the wrong bear," ringing like a gunshot through the silence. Emily stood pinned under his stare, her podium trembling as her note cards lay scattered on the floor. The crowd sat frozen, eyes wide, caught in the storm brewing on stage. Up in the booth, Nikki Butt's voice cracked through her earpiece, desperate and shrill. "Say something, Em. Don't just stand there. Fight back." Her lips parted, but no sound came, her throat tight with the weight of her crumbling plan. She'd pushed too far, and now the air crackled with the fallout. Trump stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the stage, voice low but piercing. "You want to drag Melania through the mud, Emily? Let's get real. Right here, right now." The crowd gasped, a sharp collective inhale, as he raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. "You think it's smart to ask if she's just a shadow? Let me paint you a picture." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, locking eyes with Sarah in the front row. Her heart skipped, her hands trembling with a mix of awe and fury. "She speaks 5 languages, fluent," Trump began, his tone steady, building like a tide. "She built her own career before me, without me. She's walked beside me through every deal, every attack, every lie you people throw out there." His voice rose, a roar now, shaking the studio walls. "And you sit there with your smug little smile, thinking you can sum her up with a cheap shot?" Claps erupted, sporadic at first, then a thunderous wave. Sarah leapt up, shouting, "That's right. She's a queen." Her voice cracked with emotion, tears welling as the crowd joined her, a swell of cheers. Emily flinched, her hands gripping the podium's edge, nails digging into the wood. "Mr. Trump," she stammered, forcing her voice out, thin and shaky. I'm just asking what people wonder. Your life, it's big, loud, powerful. And Melania, she's so reserved. Some say she's just there." She swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the booth for rescue. But Nikki's face was pale, his hands fumbling at the controls. "Keep going," he hissed through the earpiece. "Turn it around now." Trump's laugh cut through, short and biting, a sound that chilled the room. "Just there," he snapped, stepping forward again, his presence towering. "You've got no idea what there means, do you? She's there when the lights go out, when the deals fall through, when the vultures like you circle." His finger jabbed the air, pointing straight at her. "She's there with strength, grace, guts you couldn't dream of." The crowd roared, a deafening surge, feet stomping the floor. Sarah clapped wildly, tears streaming now, her voice lost in the chaos. "Tell her, Trump. Tell her." Emily's face drained of color, her podium rocking as she leaned back. But your world," she tried, voice quivering, grasping at straws. "The spotlight, the pressure, it's huge. Don't you think, doesn't it trap her? Like a golden cage." The words slipped out, reckless and raw, and the studio fell deathly still. Sarah's jaw dropped, her breath hitching. "A cage," she whispered, stunned, her hands falling limp. The crowd murmured, a mix of shock and anger rippling through. Trump froze, his eyes narrowing to slits, a predator sizing up prey. "A golden cage," he repeated, voice dropping to a growl, each word a hammer blow. "You think Melania's trapped? Let me set you straight, Emily, right here in front of Nashville." He turned to the audience, arms wide, voice booming. "She's not trapped. She thrives. She's faced every storm with me, every smear, every lie, and come out stronger, You call it a cage? I call it a warrior. The crowd exploded, a tidal wave of sound, people leaping to their feet. Sarah screamed, yes, yes, her fists pumping the air, tears soaking her cheeks. Emily staggered, her podium tilting as she gripped it for balance. She choked out, but Trump rolled over her, relentless. You want to talk cages? He thundered, turning back to her, eyes blazing. Look at yourself, trapped in your little game, thinking you can tear down a woman like her. Nashville sees through you. America sees through you. The cheers hit a fever pitch, a wall of noise crashing over the stage. Sarah's voice broke through, raw and fierce. She's done. He's got her. Nicky slammed the booth window, shouting into his mic, cut it. Cut to break. We're losing her. But the stage manager stood paralyzed, the red light glaring steady. Emily's hands shook, her eyes wide with panic as the crowd's roar drowned her out. Trump stepped back, calm now, his voice dropping to a steel-edged whisper. You wanted to fight, Emily. You got one, and you're not ready for what's next. The studio trembled, every soul hanging on the edge. Sarah clutched her friend's arm, breathless, whispering, he's not done. He's going to finish her. Emily's gaze flickered, trapped in the wreckage of her own making. The climax had hit, and the fallout was coming, fast, hard, and unstoppable. The Nashville studio thrummed with the weight of Trump's vow, you're not ready for what's next. A chilling promise that lingered like smoke over the crowd. Emily stood rooted behind her podium, her hands shaking as she gripped its edge, her note card a scattered mess on the floor, glinting under the harsh lights. The audience's cheers faded into a restless hush. Every gaze locked on Trump as he paced the stage, his steps deliberate, his presence a storm brewing in silence. Up in the control booth, Nicky Butt's voice crackled through her earpiece, sharp and desperate. Get it together and hit him back. Don't just stand there. Her breath caught, her chest tight, but her voice stayed trapped, her once smug facade crumbling live on air. Trump wheeled around, his eyes piercing through her like steel. You thought you'd take me down, didn't you? He said, his voice low, cutting the stillness with a razor's edge. Thought you'd drag Melania through your dirt for a quick win. He stepped closer, his shadow swallowing her podium, his red tie a stark slash against the black suit. She's my partner. Through every battle, every smear, every cheap lie you people cook up. His tone surged, bold and unyielding, a fire lighting the room. Claps broke out, sharp and eager, swelling into a rolling thunder. Sarah sat forward in the front row, tears brimming in her deep-set eyes, her whisper barely audible. He's speaking for us, for every family holding on through the years. Emily's lips trembled, her voice clawing its way out, thin and fragile. I wasn't dragging her down, Mr. Trump, she pleaded, her fingers digging into the podium's wood. Your life, it's massive, loud, powerful. Doesn't it overshadow her somehow? Boos rumbled through the crowd, a low growl of disapproval shaking the seats. Trump's laugh sliced through, short and biting, a sound that sent a chill down spines. Overshadow, he roared, throwing his arms wide, his voice booming off the walls. You think this is some game, Emily? She's my rock. 28 years of strength, grace, guts. Not a shadow in sight. Cheers erupted, a tidal wave of sound crashing over the stage, the floor trembling beneath the stomping feet. Sarah leapt up, her voice cracking as she shouted, yes, she's a rock. Tears spilled down her cheeks, her hands clapping until they stung, her friend nodding beside her with wet eyes. Emily squared her shoulders, desperation fueling her next move. But the pressure, the spotlight, the endless grind, she pressed, her voice rising in a shaky pitch. Don't you ever think trading up? You could have anyone. The crowd sucked in a collective breath, boos exploding like a cannon blast, raw and furious. Sarah sank back in her seat, her jaw dropping, her voice a stunned whisper. Trading up? She dared say that, her hands balled into fists, trembling with rage and disbelief. Trump froze, his eyes narrowing to slits, his face hardening as the words sank in. Trading up, he repeated, his voice dropping to a gravelly growl, each syllable a deliberate strike. You think that's what this is? Let me tell you about value, Emily, real value. It's loyalty. It's someone who stands by you when the world turns dark. Melania is worth more than you'll ever grasp. Applause roared through the studio, a deafening surge that shook the lights. Sarah sobbed openly, her shout piercing the chaos. Never. She's everything. Her friend grabbed her arm, steadying her as tears fell. Emily's face drained of color, her podium wobbling as she stammered. I didn't mean. Trump cut her off, his voice thundering over her like a freight train. You meant every damn word, and that's why you're finished. Nashville sees through your tricks. America sees it too. The crowd hit a fever pitch, a wall of noise slamming into her, chairs rattling with the force. Nicky pounded the booth window, his voice a panicked yell. Cut to break, cut it now. But the stage manager stood frozen, the red light glaring relentlessly, trapping Emily in her own collapse. Trump turned to the audience, arms raised high, his voice steadying into a fierce, commanding calm. This isn't just about Melania. It's about every couple out there who's stood tall together. You don't trade that kind of love. You fight for it. You treasure it. Cheers rained down, a torrent of raw support washing over the stage. Sarah wiped her eyes with a shaky hand, her whisper soft but firm. 28 years for me, too. He gets it, he really does. Her friend squeezed her shoulder, nodding through her own tears, the crowd's energy pulsing around them. Emily slumped against her podium, her eyes hollow, her spirit broken under the weight of her misstep. The fight was over. She'd lost everything, and Trump's final blow hovered, ready to seal her fate in front of the world. The Nashville studio trembled under the weight of Trump's final salvo. You don't trade the kind of love. You fight for it. You treasure it. A rallying cry that ignited the crowd into a frenzy. Emily slumped against her podium, a broken figure, her once sharp smile gone, her hands limp as the red light glared mercilessly from above. The audience stood tall, their cheers a rolling thunder, but a charged silence crept in as Trump stepped to the edge of the stage, his eyes sweeping the sea of faces. Nicky but sat frozen in the booth, his headset dangling, his voice a faint, defeated mutter. It's over, she's done. Trump raised a hand, the gesture commanding instant quiet, his presence filling every corner of the room. Let me finish this, he said, voice low but resonant, carrying a weight that pinned Emily where she stood. You try to tear down Melania, try to make her small. But here's what you don't get, Emily. He paused, turning to face her fully, his gaze unrelenting. She's bigger than your little traps, stronger than your cheap words. Claps burst out, a steady pulse growing louder. Sarah, tears streaking her face, whispered, He's right, she's a giant. Emily's head jerked up, her voice a fragile thread. Mr. Trump, I was just asking, she stammered, but he cut her off, his tone rising sharp and clear. No, you weren't asking. You were attacking, and you picked the wrong target. His words hit like a fist, the crowd roaring back to life, a surge of raw energy. Melania is my heart, my rock. She stood by me through hell, 28 years, and you think you can judge that? Cheers erupted, shaking the walls. Sarah leapt up, shouting, damn straight. She's a queen, her voice breaking with pride, hands clapping fiercely. Trump turned back to the audience, his voice steadying, a fire still burning beneath. This isn't just about us. It's about you. Every couple out there who's faced the storms, 20, 30, 40 years together. You don't trade that for some shallow fantasy. His arms swept wide, pointing to Sarah, her eyes wide with awe. Folks like her, they know what real love is. Not your Hollywood garbage. The crowd roared again, a tidal wave of sound, feet stomping in rhythm. Sarah clutched her chest, sobbing. 28 years. He sees us. Her friend hugged her tight, tears falling too. Emily sank lower, her podium creaking under her weight, her voice a faint gasp. I didn't mean to, Trump spun on her, his tone dropping to a steel-edged calm. You meant it, Emily, and that's your downfall. You don't get to twist love into your game. Nashville won't let you. America won't let you. The crowd's cheers hit a deafening peak, a wall of noise that swallowed her whole. Nicky threw his headset down, slumping in the booth, his whisper lost. We're toast, she's toast. Trump stepped forward, facing the cameras, his voice a solemn vow. Melania is my one and only, always will be. That's what makes us strong, what makes America strong. Not your lies, not your traps, just real, honest love. The audience surged to its feet, a standing ovation that shook the studio to its core. Sarah's hands flew up, her shout piercing the chaos. Yes, that's it. Tears flowed freely now, her heart pounding with every word. Emily staggered back, her podium tilting, her eyes vacant as the reality crashed down. She'd lost, utterly and completely. Trump turned one last time, his voice soft but firm, a final nail in the coffin. So next time you want to play, Emily, pick someone your own size. You're out of your league here. The crowd erupted, a final, triumphant roar, as the red light finally flickered off, the stage manager's hand shaking on the switch. Sarah wiped her eyes, whispering, "He finished her," and lifted us all. The studio lights dimmed, the echoes of the showdown fading, but the air still buzzed with emotion. Trump stood tall, unbowed, his victory sealed in the hearts of every soul watching. Emily crumpled, a shadow of herself, while Sarah sat back, her tear-streaked face glowing with pride. The fight was over, and the message rang clear: love wins, always. Thanks for watching, folks. If this hit you like it hit me, if this fired you up, smash that like button, share it with your crew, and drop a comment. Tell me your story of standing strong or where you're tuning in from. Let's keep this fire alive. Subscribe now. You're the best part of this channel. See you soon.